So I think I needed that failure, I needed that rejection to make me raise my game. You know, and there's nothing like someone telling an entrepreneur particularly no to make you go, just watch me. And also, I mean, it will be no surprise, I'm sure, to many people listening that the very little funding goes to female founders. It's only about 2% of the venture funding out there. So I felt very passionate about making a dent in this space and getting more women out there being confident and successful at raising investment if they need to. Surrounded by shoes every day. I mean, who wouldn't want to be surrounded by beautiful shoes every day? Working with celebrities and the media, you know, it was kind of, I really thought I'd got it.
Hi, welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up, the podcast. I'm Sam Cooper-Gray, and this is my passion project to interview interesting people about their lives and find out about what makes them tick and what have they learned in their journey to adulthood. Today, we are incredibly lucky to have Julia Elliott Brown with us. So Julia is a serial entrepreneur and board advisor. She's worked in the startup industry for over 25 years, built, funded and grown a number of successful businesses. She sits on a number of boards. And she's also an author. She has a best-selling book called Raise, The Female Founder's Guide to Securing Investment, and it's not product placement. I do actually have it over there in my bookcase. And she also has a very own podcast, so we might end up talking about that, Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. She's a member of the Women and Enterprise All-Party Parliamentary Group and a long-standing judge on the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. She's also a mentor for Barclays Eagle Labs and the NatWest Entrepreneurial Programmes, really giving back into that entrepreneurial startup world. She speaks regularly in the media representing the voice of female founders. And as I know personally, she has a huge passion for empowering women, especially female businesses. Julia, welcome. Thank you for making the time to be interviewed today.
Hey, Sam. It's great to see you. Really nice to see you.
So first question I ask everybody is, tell me about your journey into adulthood.
Oh, goodness me, where do we even start with that one, Sam? That is an epic question. I'm not going to give you my whole life history, but I guess what's pertinent, I grew up in a rural village in Warwickshire, so not much to do there, not much going on. I was always a precocious child, I think my mother would say, always asking the question why at everything. Why? And I guess that's something that I've always done, not only as a child, but going on to being an adult. So very curious about the world, wanting to know how things worked, what was going on, and I wanted to try everything. So doing acrobatics, ballet, tap, gymnastics, singing, dancing, I would throw myself into absolutely everything as a child. And what else? I was quite bossy, probably. That was a word that was often thrown
Leadership
at me.
Skills, Julia. Leadership skills, not bossy.
I mean, the word bossy is a funny one, isn't it? Because I think we sort of need to reclaim that. But I was always bossy. The oldest of three daughters, so three girls, and the oldest, I've got two younger sisters. And was very active and smart at school, so annoyingly smart at school. My mum was a teacher. She was incredible, actually. She kind of taught me to read and write before I even started school and made sure I got all the opportunities. So she kind of lobbied to get me put up a year at school. So I was always known as that sort of that girl who got put up at school. So did well at school, very, very active and sporty. And I just kind of embraced everything that life threw at me as a child. Very industrious. I couldn't wait to start work. As soon as I could go and get a job, I got a job. I wanted to earn money. I loved working. I waitressed. I did a bit of chefing. I worked as a receptionist. Taught myself to type. I'd stuff envelopes for money. I would kind of do anything that would keep me busy, get me out there, earn me extra pocket money. So that was kind of the kind of child I was. And I guess it's weird. I always knew that I wanted to go into business. I think maybe because I was a child of the 80s, I was kind of heavily influenced by this media image of power women with power shoulders and kind of high heels.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Big shoulder pads and big hair. And I had this vision of sort of being a businesswoman with a briefcase, walking into London up steps and being very important. So I always kind of had this vision of business. And I think my dad was probably quite influential too. My dad sadly passed away when I was just before I was 15. He had leukemia, and I think that's probably, his words of wisdom to me as a child and as a teenager have always carried through. He taught me to take a lot of risks as a child. I was always kind of climbing trees and swimming out to the furthest buoy that you could see in the ocean, and mixing concrete with my dad. He always taught me that I could kind of do anything I wanted to do and be anyone I wanted to be. A couple of things I remember my dad saying to me. One was, you could be chairwoman of ICI if you wanted to be. Not quite there yet, Sam, but that was...
There's time, Julia, there's
time. You never know. And he always said to me, go and get an MBA. That would be really good for you to get an MBA. So those two things I think I really carried through from my dad. So growing up in rural Warwickshire, but I couldn't wait to get away to kind of fulfil this dream of becoming this power 80s businesswoman that I'd had in my mind somehow. So went away to university, to Nottingham Trent University to study business, which I did European business, which kind of also had a year abroad in France, because France was my major. So loved the experience of being abroad, experiencing different cultures, and the freedom of kind of being away. I loved that. What I decided kind of whilst I was at university, and again, this was a great piece of advice that somebody gave me on my journey to adulthood, was how valuable it would be to do a graduate scheme. Mm-hmm. So I decided post-university that that's what I wanted to do. And so I worked really hard at uni. I also partied pretty hard at university, I have to say. I think I got the blend quite well there. But I managed to get a first, which was unbelievable. Wow. I was incredibly proud of that achievement, actually, I have to say.
Yeah.
And got accepted onto a graduate scheme at Reuters. The news agency, or the media organisation that I thought it was. I was so excited I was going to come to London and have this career in media. Of course, I didn't really realise that Reuters was all about information and data and technology into the world of investment and banking. So it wasn't quite the sort of sexy, glamorous world of media that I thought I was getting into.
It wasn't Vogue. It wasn't,
It wasn't Vogue, Sam. It wasn't Vogue, which was really where I should have been, to be honest with you. So I sort of... And it was brilliant. It was a great grounding, into the world of work. They invested a lot of resources and time and energy into developing us as graduates. I had incredible training. I got to spend a year in Singapore, which was awesome. Again, another way of kind of exploring the world, exploring different cultures. I did a lot of travelling when I was out there. So that was an amazing experience that I got through being on that graduate scheme. But eventually I found myself sort of back in London looking after two big investment banks. I was looking after Deutsche Bank and Morgan Stanley. They were the accounts I managed. And I just kind of, I thought it was a great experience, but I quite quickly realised that the big corporate world wasn't really for me, Sam, I have to say.
Yeah.
I felt a bit constrained. And as much as I loved my time at Reuters, I think I found kind of looking after data and software products quite boring. Sorry for anyone from my Reuters days listening to this. But, I was on the investment floor and there was just hundreds of kind of blokes in suits sitting at desks, like looking at trading information. And, it didn't really float my boat. I kind of wanted something a bit more creative, a bit more exciting. And I'd heard, the whole .com world was taking off by then. So we're now sort of tracing in time, late 90s, was all the sexy .com, but I really wanted to get into it. And so I jumped ship and went to work for a .com startup called upmystreet.com, which was a real internet pioneer of its day.
Yeah.
Where it was a local information publisher. You could put your postcode in and find out all about where you lived. It was really cool. Weirdly, in the days where this website was basically one long page of information. There was no such thing as a navigation bar.
No.
Which is hard to imagine, actually. But I loved it. It was a small team, super smart people, all of whom had come from kind of traditional media into this world of new media. We had a pool table, we had free massages in the office, and I just kind of felt like this is where I should be. This is my home. I felt like I could be who I was. I didn't feel like I needed to be a different person outside of work to who I was in work. It's funny actually thinking back to the corporate world. I mean, I remember one of these 360 reviews I had, and I'll never forget this negative comment I had, which was that blue toenail varnish is very inappropriate and I should not wear it. And I just thought, God, if I want to paint my toenails blue, I will. And I'm sure you'll appreciate that, Sam. I'm looking at you here with your beautiful
with my bright pink hair. Yeah, I think the world's moved on a little, at least.
It has moved on a little bit. But it suited me, that kind of creative, dynamic space with lots of ambition, with really lots of smart people. And it was a great place to work. And within a couple of years, actually, that business got bought by uswitch.com, which is the utility switching company. And they actually asked me to then run Up My Street as a subsidiary of their business. So amazing. I mean, I'm cutting a long story short here, but age 27, I was running one of the leading .com companies at the time, which had 1 million unique visitors a month. We had a small team that I was running. I sat on the management team of uswitch.com, and I felt like I was really flying the kind of the world of new media and was flying, and I loved it. I really loved it, and it was challenging. The business got bought by uswitch. There were some cultural challenges in getting the two companies to fit, but I think we worked it out quite well. So I got married. I went off on maternity leave to have my first baby, James, my boy, who is now, good God, like 19 years old. I can't believe it. How did that happen? But it was weird because whilst I was on maternity leave, I guess I got my first taste of kind of being sidelined because I was a woman, feeling that discrimination. And it's quite hard to piece it together now, but whilst I was away on maternity leave, Up My Street got sold by uswitch to a US media company, Scripps. And I knew nothing about it. Nobody told me about it. Nobody kept me informed. They sold this business that I was running. It was really quite odd. And I felt very frustrated. I'd tried to negotiate myself some equity in that business along the years when I was working for uswitch, and I didn't push it. I thought it will happen one day. I didn't kind of negotiate that effectively, and I kind of really felt like I'd been done over, actually. And I came back from maternity leave, and they said, well, we can find something for you, a couple of days, 3 days a week in uswitch. But I felt like they were having to find something for me.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right. Didn't really feel particularly valued, and so I decided to leave. Did a little stint at a business called Home Track, which is a property data company where you can get your house valued. Did about a year there, and then I thought, right, enough is enough. I've worked for enough kind of, let's just say, crazy people. Some kind of big egos that I'd worked for, and I'd spent too much time thinking, what, if I was in charge, I wouldn't be doing it like this. And I thought, I can't keep saying that to myself anymore. I need to be going out there and forging my own story. And so I set up my first business, which was just a small consultancy business, going out and helping other small to medium-sized businesses kind of make the most of this whole new media space. This media space, which was actually turning into Web 2.0, which we now call social media.
Yeah. We're showing our age here, Julia.
We're showing our age. Oh my God. I know, it's crazy.
Well before social media.
Well before social media. But So I really enjoyed that, did that for a few years. I really enjoyed helping other businesses be successful. It was really fun. And it was the heady days of, again, all the exciting stuff that was happening with Apple and San Francisco, and I was kind of going over there to do trade shows and stuff. I really enjoyed it. Whilst I was running that consultancy, my sister and I had the idea for my second entrepreneurial venture, which I did with her, which was a design your own shoe company. So a completely different thing, a consumer business where you could sit on your computer at home and design your own pair of beautiful shoes from hundreds of different options of styles and heel heights and shapes and sizes and materials. Create it in front of your eyes, press a button, and have those shoes handmade for you and delivered to you within a few weeks. And that's a long story. If you want to hear more about that story, you have to buy my book, which isn't all about that, but has a part of that story in it. There you go. There's the teaser for you. And that was a kind of, I guess, my main kind of real entrepreneurial venture. From absolute startup through to getting that business off the ground, bringing a team together, putting all of our own savings into that business to make it happen, going out and securing funding from venture capital firms and from angels and from crowdfunding, which was super stressful. I'm sure we'll talk about that some more in a minute. Or through to starting to scale the business, through to having to close that business down because we couldn't secure any further funding. So it was a 7-year roller coaster ride of a journey, and that was really a huge education for me, a huge ride. I absolutely loved it. It was super glamorous, I was surrounded by shoes every day. I mean, who wouldn't want to be surrounded by beautiful shoes every day? Working with celebrities and the media, it was kind of, I really thought I'd got it made. I thought, this is me, I've arrived. Finally, this dream of the person I wanted to be. But it all came crashing down. And off the back of that, I really kind of had to do a lot of soul searching about what it was that I wanted to do next. Because when you've had a business like that was so all-consuming, where it was everything to me, it was my identity. What was I going to do next? I certainly felt like I was completely unemployable.
I think all entrepreneurs say that, don't they? I don't think I've met an entrepreneur who thinks they could be employed by somebody else.
No way. I mean, really, just always wanted to do things my own way. But I really didn't know what I was going to do. But then I thought to myself, I've had so many other female founders, so many other women come to me along that journey and ask for my support and advice, particularly around how to raise investment, because I'd raised £2 million of funding for that business, which was no mean feat, actually, when I look back at it. So many women had asked my advice, to pick my brains. And I just thought, there's something in this, because I really like helping other people. I'd like to see other people succeed where I have failed. I'd like to for other women to avoid the pitfalls that I'd seriously fallen down, and there were many. And also, I mean, it will be no surprise, I'm sure, to many people listening, that the very little funding goes to female founders. It's only about 2% of the venture funding out there. So I felt very passionate about making a dent in this space and getting more women out there being confident and successful at raising investment if they need to raise investment, and scaling their businesses. Because frankly, otherwise we've got the world run by a load of tech bros, which unfortunately seems to be the case. But we can't have that. We need more diversity. And so I set up, actually very quickly, within a month of closing one business, I'd set up the next one. Like a crazy mad woman.
I feel this links back to the childhood. I was always doing loads of different things. I was all trying something new. I never sat still. That seems to be a theme.
I think so, yeah. I can't really sit on my arse. I have to do stuff. I mean, it's about problem solving as well. If you see problems out there, just have to solve it. So it's 8 years ago now. I set up Enter the Arena. I can't believe it's been 8 years, Sam. Enter the Arena, which is an advisory firm that supports high growth businesses led by female founders, supporting them with building their businesses for growth, with raising investment, and with good governance. So I've been doing that for 8 years, and it's been such a pleasure. I've worked with thousands of women, with workshops, masterclasses, lots and lots of one-on-one support across all different sectors. And everybody has huge challenges, but those challenges are often very common. And what I think is I can bring my experience, having sort of lived it at the coalface, to those women and give them that kind of encouragement and guidance to help them be successful. So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. And then, so I really feel like an adult now. And now I'm a proper adult because I'm actually, now I'm sitting on a number of boards, and that's probably most of the work I do now is working at board level with really great female founder-led businesses. And that's something that I really enjoy. It's a longer term work with a client. It's more strategic. It's covers all sorts of skills and experience, not just fundraising, but everything really. And it's a real privilege to be able to do that. So there you go, Sam. There's my whistle stop tour from childhood to where I am
There's
today.
definitely a theme of being busy, but not a busy fool, trying new stuff, throwing yourself into things and kind of learning as you go, and that acknowledgement that working for someone else probably wasn't for you. But, which I have to say has come up, I think, in every single every single podcast that we've done with an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's funny that the entrepreneur, I mean, when I was young, we didn't really have this word entrepreneur. No. And even when I started Upper Street, the design your own shoe brand that I had, which is, when was that? Like, I don't know, let's say, must be 15, 16 years ago. Again, at the beginning, the word entrepreneur wasn't really a thing. So nobody talked about entrepreneurship. And certainly when I was at school, we didn't, I went to a sort of normal comprehensive school in rural Warwickshire. Everybody's parents were sort of teachers or nurses or doctors or architects. Or nobody worked in finance. Nobody was an entrepreneur. So kind of didn't know that that's what I was until much later, when it's like, okay, this is exactly who I am and who I've always been, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so looking back then at your 18-year-old self, who, as you said, your dad said, go off, get an MBA, go do stuff. But, at 18, just off to university in Nottingham, if she could see you now, what would she recognise? What would she be like, yep, I knew she was going to do that? What would she recognise in who you are now?
I think she would certainly recognise my ambition. That ambition has always been there. But I think what's interesting is that ambition has taken quite a different shape. When I was younger, that ambition was mostly pretty self-interested, I would say. It was all about kind of elbows out, kind of how can I get to where I want to go, wanting to win, wanting to have more influence, wanting to be successful, earn more, run more things, quite ego-driven, I would say. Very ego-driven, quite selfish at times, very independent, selfish. And I think, but as time has gone on and I've kind of got older and wiser, that's softened. I think, and that ambition has shifted considerably, particularly in the last, it's been shifting for a long time, but I think shifting to be an ambition to make a difference and to support others. So that's been my focus for a long time now. I think we think about that, don't we, as adults? We think, what is it? Is it about having a legacy, or I don't know? It's about making that impact, and that impact is not how high can you rise. That impact is how much can you help others rise, and what difference can that make in the world? Because if I think about all those startups that I've had the pleasure to work with and support, you know, of course, many of them won't be successful, but some of them will be. And those are businesses, especially the ones led by women, that are going out and doing some really incredible things in the world. So that impact is, you know, is kind of exponential, really, when you start to flip that ambition in different ways. So I don't know, it's interesting. And I now look at that ambition and think, where can I take that piece next? I'm not sure what the answer to that is yet, Sam, but I feel that now. I mean, I've just turned 50 in October, and so kind of coming into this next part of my life is how can I take that ambition and do more good in the world beyond just the industry that I work in. So I don't know. I'll let you know when I've decided.
Okay. When you've worked it out. Yeah, definitely. You'll have to write another book then, Julia.
Oh, God. I'm not sure about that. I mean, so people ask me that all the time, actually, because it's like, you know, well, they do, but it's like writing a book is not easy. You know, it was a lot. It was a lot of work writing that book. I wrote it. I started it in the pandemic when I thought I had some breathing space, which didn't last very long. It's hard work, right? It was a labour of love. The computer nearly went out the window about 10 times. When my editor said, "I think we need another draft," I'd be like, "What?" But got there. So yeah, not sure it'll be another book, but we'll see.
Okay. So we've talked about, you know, that your 18-year-old self would recognise that ambition. What would she be absolutely blown away by and amazed by in the woman that you've become? I think, I mean, if I look at the work lens, I think she would be amazed that I'm where I am now. And I'm quite surprised by that too, actually, because I think I kind of, for a long time, had that ambition to have a portfolio board career. But I always thought that was something you kind of got when you're in your 60s, when it was all over. And so to start moving into board work in my late 40s, I felt was, a real achievement. And I got there sooner. I feel like I kind of matured sooner than I thought I would. So I achieved that goal, a lot earlier. So I think she'd be quite amazed by that. And I think she'd probably be quite amazed that I am less selfish than she was at 18. I think I am anyway. That there's a lot of love in what I do, and I think she'd be quite amazed by that. Yeah, amazing. Tell me about where you've experienced like real rejection or failure, and kind of how you dealt with that, what you learned from it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, kind of trying to raise investment for Upper Street, when we first went out to try and raise investment, that was really tough because got so much rejection on that. Mostly because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just kind of like winging it. I mean, of course, like we all wing it. We're winging it every day, aren't we? Really. But it was one of those things where I thought I could wing it. I'm like, I can, full of ridiculous overconfidence, which is, also one of my negative traits. How hard can it be? Rocking up to the kind of glossy Mayfair offices of these big venture capital firms and, with my sort of a shoebox with me to get my beautiful shoes out on the table and everything and tell them about this business. It was bloody hard because I was mostly talking to male investors. Most of them would look at me and kind of go, "What, shoes? Do people really buy that many shoes?" Of course, I would then tell them to go and look in their wife's wardrobe and they would get the answer to that. But definitely wasn't easy to be taken seriously. And I think part of that was I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't really properly prepared. I hadn't really got all my ducks in a row. And I didn't really know what kind of interrogation I was going to get from the kind of the money men, I guess. So it was quite soul destroying, and I felt a little bit like a sort of a plastic bag being blown around in the wind, because you go and meet with one investor and they'd sort of criticise the business in one way and tell you should be doing something else with it. And I'd start to question myself and then go back and sort of have a look at the plans and then go and speak to someone else and they'd tell me something completely different. I'd kind of, it was just, I didn't know where I was going with it. And And it was also really kind of squeaky bum time because the business desperately needed cash. We were running out of cash, and I could see that happening. And we, my sister and I were all in on this thing. We put everything into this business, and we had a small team. We had an office. We had some overheads there. It was really super stressful. But it was kind of also really defining because once you've had that kind of rejection, you've got to then go back deep inside and look at what's going on here, because there's something I'm doing wrong. There's something that's not right here.
Yeah.
Is it the business that's not right? Is it me that's not right? Is it my approach? What's going on? So I had to kind of really go back into the business, really go into myself and look at, where really do we want to go? What gets super focused on our goals, really think through our growth plans in detail, get tightened up on all of our financials and the way we were pitching, and really just kind of work on my mindset. And it was such a shift. Sam, when I went back out a few months later to raise investment again, because I was totally in this space where I was like, I'm building this incredible business. I've got all my ducks in a row. If you want to invest and join us, amazing. If you don't, jog on, because I'm going to go and talk to someone else. And I think that confidence I then went back out with was quite magnetic, and actually then secured investment really quickly, really, really quickly. So it was that blend of kind of being really well prepared, but having that mindset. So I think I needed that failure. I needed that rejection to make me raise my game. You know, and there's nothing like someone telling an entrepreneur particularly no to make you go, just watch me, because you'll see what I can do. And I did, and so it made me resilient. I was never going to give up on that dream. So yeah, I'm quite similar. If someone tells me I can't do something, it's a bit like red rag to a bull.
So what do you mean I can't do it? Don't be ridiculous. Of course I can.
Exactly.
Even if it's something I don't want to do.
Exactly.
See, through that journey, you're having to make lots of decisions, all the time, lots of decisions. What's the best decision you've ever made?
I think, if I look at where I am now, I think it was really my decision to focus on working with female founders. And I had, again, it was one of those things where everybody said to me I was making a mistake in doing that. They said, that's too niche. If you do that, you're never going to make any money. This is men telling me this, by the way.
Obviously.
You're not going to make any money, as if that was my priority for a start, which it wasn't. Of course, we all need to make a living, but I wasn't doing it so I could make money. I thought that was really interesting, actually. Excuse me. So they said I wouldn't make money. They said there wasn't enough of a market. And I grappled with it for a while. I grappled with, should I be supporting all entrepreneurs? But it just didn't sit right with me. It didn't kind of, it didn't feel right in my gut. Yeah. And I thought, no, I'm going to follow this and see where it goes. And I'm so glad I did, because what it enabled me to do was exactly that, to carve out that niche and actually become really, really good at what I do, because I'd really, really focused on something very small. Not small. Yeah. The small's not the right word, because actually it's a huge opportunity, really. Yeah. But that going into that niche meant that I could really hone my craft and really get it right. Because working with women and working with female founders I found really, really different from working with other entrepreneurs. The experience is quite different. The way women approach things and think is often quite different. I don't want to generalise too much, but we've been conditioned in a very different way. We've had a very different experience growing up, and so for me to be able to really tap into that and get that right was super important to me. So and I look. When I started, it was so tiny into the arena. The first year the revenue was like nothing, and it's never been huge. This is not a big business. That I'm scaling. It's a small advisory company, really, but it's successful in its niche, and that's great. So I think I would never do anything because it'd make money. It has to come from the heart.
Yeah, I think that's quite a female trait as well, and I think. As you say, doing something that you have a passion for I think that gives you the edge, right? Even if it is a niche, and I know from the work you do at Enter the Arena, like one female entrepreneur at a time, you're helping make female entrepreneurship less niche because there's more and more of them out there, and we know it's a growing body of women who are, starting businesses, getting funded, and Enter Arena is definitely such a key part of that. So I think what you do is amazing. You touched on the fact that lots of men gave you advice, mostly men gave you advice not to do it, not to go into the niche. But what's the best advice you've been given that you just completely ignored?
That's such an interesting question. Because I always think if I ignored it, I didn't think it was very good advice. I got some really good advice, when I was working in a big corporate environment, about how actually, if I wanted to be successful there, I'd need to understand more about how to network and actually how to play politics. And I didn't take it at the time. I didn't like this idea of having to do that. I kind of really felt like I should be judged on my merit for the work I do.
Yeah.
I think that was quite naive as a young woman, that I didn't really understand that. And had I taken that advice and played that game and stayed in the corporate world, I'm sure I would have been very successful. I'm sure I would have earned a ton of money. Way more money than I ever would have earned as an entrepreneur, that's for sure. But do I wish I'd stayed in that corporate world? No. I don't wish I'd stayed in that corporate world because it wasn't for me. As we talked about, I needed to follow the entrepreneurial path. But I do think that advice around networking and politics, is valuable. And I know now how important networking is. I mean, it's something that I advise all the clients I work with, to be doing that as soon as they can and all the time. It takes time to pay off. It takes time for your networks to build and for the trust and the relationships to play out. But goodness me, now, at this point now where I'm sitting at board level, it is such a joy to be able to work with my network to make things happen. Yeah. Because if I've got an entrepreneur who's got a problem, you can pretty much guarantee that if I don't know how to help them, I can find someone else who can. And it is such a joy to be able to join the dots at every opportunity. And I think I could never have done that without networking. So I kind of, should I have started doing that earlier in my career? Yes, but I wasn't quite mature enough to see that merit alone isn't enough, and as women we've got to get better at putting ourselves forward, kind of banging the drum, being a little bit loud, like blowing our own trumpet. Let's get another analogy in there. We have to, because otherwise we won't be heard.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I think I know I was similar in my 20s, had a real allergic reaction to networking for networking's sake. And it wasn't until I got older and actually had a network that I realised it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be difficult. It can be about finding like-minded people who you're interested in. It's not about spending lots of time with people who you might not have anything in common with. But you can then leverage that network to help others, and others will leverage their network to help you. And I think once you work that out, you realise how important it is. But when you're younger, I think especially as a young woman, I had such an allergic reaction to the idea of playing politics, networking, just for networking's sake. So I think I was very similar.
Yeah, I mean it's actually really intimidating, isn't it, when you're young, because and also a lot of these networking events, you go into this networking event and it's like a sea of suits, and you're like, oh my god, where do I start? And this view that you think it's all going to be about swapping business cards and everything, and the networking is like that if it's bad networking. But actually there are so many other interesting ways to network, and those skills about how do you start a conversation with someone, how do you build that rapport quickly, you've got to learn those things, and you get that as you mature. So I think it is really hard to do that when you're just out of the blocks in your career. Really tough.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So, as part of the podcast, and obviously it's called The Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up, and you said one book was enough. I think I might have one book in me, and I'd love to turn what we talked about in the podcast when I've talked to everyone that I've spoken to, into a book, into the beginner's guide. If I managed to get that book up and running, what would be your nugget? What would be your one piece of advice that you would put into a beginner's guide to being a grown-up that you think would help other people?
I think the most important thing I've learned as a grown-up is how important it is to do things from the heart. You've got to listen to your heart. So it's about tapping into that inner voice that you have, that inner spirituality, I guess, that is what's your calling in life. How can you really add value to the world? How can you help? How can you add value? If it doesn't connect with your heart, don't do it. And I think, certainly as a young woman, I didn't quite get that, and now I do. And so for me now, if it doesn't connect with my heart, then I'm not going to do it.
I love it. I think that's a great piece of advice. If it doesn't connect with your heart, don't do it. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people, it takes them a while to work that out. So, yeah, fantastic advice. Thank you. Julia, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our chat, learning a little bit more about your history, your background, and about the businesses that you've run and the roles that you've done. And I'm sure all of our listeners will have really enjoyed the journey that we've taken today as well. So thank you so much for your time and for being interviewed today. My
absolute pleasure, Sam. And if you need any help with how to get that book out, I'm a woman.
Excellent. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If there's someone who inspires you that you'd like me to interview, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok. In the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.